Hello and welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Sisters podcast. This is Gabrielle Celeste. And guess what, guys? We are in the midst of Mercury retrograde, and your girl has recorded this episode already one time. And because of interruptions, editing process, she has to re-record again. So here we are. She's also a little bit under the weather. I am congested, and I'm not sure if it's like allergies, cold, RSV. All kind of feels very similar to RSV, but I'm trying not to like lean into that and proclaim it. And I think it's just really interesting because it's all happening in the midst of an eclipse season. So we're going to get all the complaining out of the way, and we're going to get to what we're going to be talking about today. But I felt like if you're looking at me on YouTube, we got to talk about literally the breakouts that I'm having, the purging that I'm having, the cycle that I'm having. So here we are recording on the Friday before the Tuesday drop, and I'm just going to push through because we haven't missed an episode yet, and we're going to get shit done because that's what we do around here. So I can lean into my masculine energy and push it out because it's very familiar for me. So what we're going to be talking about today is what I've learned in my first full year of entrepreneurship, and really what I've learned in my third year of business. So April 2026 marks the start of year 4. And I previously on my YouTube channels or my YouTube channel, well, we have two. I have one for my business and then the podcast, have captured what I've discussed and like what I've learned in the first year, the second year, and now we're doing what I've learned in the third year. And so if you want to go check those out, those videos are up on my YouTube channel. And I really haven't been posting too much on there because I've been focusing on TikTok. So on TikTok, you can find me at Starseed Strategy, which is my business focused one. And I also have my, I guess, personal, which is actually under my business name, which is Agua Astrology. So both are active. Go ahead and check me out on there. And also, if you're listening to this recording in real time, I am launching my follow-up astrology course to my natal astrology, which is it's called Compass, and we're focusing on transits in astrology and predictions, and it's an intermediary course, but if you are familiar with astrology, if you want to learn more, it really is a personalized experience, even though it's in a group container, and I would love to have you. So we start on the Pisces new moon on the 18th. The course runs for 6 weeks, and you have lifetime access to all of the content and information that I have really learned on my journey over the last, oh my goodness, well, lifetime, in this lifetime, but really focused on astrology in the last 6 years. So be sure to check that out. There are multiple payment plans available, and I am sure to make it worth your while. So I wanted to talk about in this episode really what I've learned in this last year. So much of it has been really through entrepreneurship, and it's been mirrored back to me because honestly, entrepreneurship really is personal development on steroids. And you may have also heard that in 2025, in previous episodes, it was probably the hardest year of my adult life. And I feel like that was the case because I confronted head on at 100 miles per hour the shadow and the darkness within myself, which is no easy feat. And I feel like that was not in vain. And I'm very curious to see what the purpose of it all was as this year 2026 transpires and unfolds. And I feel like I learned a lot about myself, but also just in business in general. And I wanted to talk about that. And so I wanted to also share that the podcast is going to be dropping. Well, we hit 3 years in April for the podcast. We started that in April of 2023. So the business will be 4. The podcast is 3. And we have some exciting news that we are just kind of waiting for our content. Pictures that we just took to come out and be sharing, some rebranding, and as well as just some exciting news that I will probably share on Instagram, and we'll speak to that in upcoming episodes. So stay tuned for that. And so, yeah, a little bit of background context in terms of like my experience in entrepreneurship. And I guess just maybe my career set in general. Maybe that'll be helpful for some people that are out there and how this kind of came together. So I have my North Node in my 10th house of career. which means your north node, wherever it's at in your birth chart, it's showing you where a lot of your soul contracts are going to be met, and basically where the focus is going to be in terms of where your energy is going and what you're really meant to focus and do in this lifetime and all the things, right? And so I am very career driven, very, I guess, career oriented. And I've always been that way. I've always been like, I guess, an overachiever, if you will. And so I started my, I guess, early career set in, I worked for the IRS for the tax department there. And I worked for the attorneys in the tax department. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought I'd be an attorney and so forth. And then that position led me to work in my corporate position where I was at for nearly 7 to 8 years, where I was the fall guy for the multi-million-dollar investigation. And I scooted on out of there around my Saturn return. That was my Saturn return. And in that period of time, I really discovered that I wanted to be a spiritual entrepreneur, but I knew it was going to happen right away. And I asked the universe for this, and this, and it ended up being a remote job in clinical research, which I worked on second generation COVID vaccines. And I was building Agua Astrology at the time. And in between then, I would take odd jobs. I was working as a fitness trainer. I worked in restaurants, waitressing. So I've done a lot of different things. And when you look at my astrology, when you know my cardology and my background, I meant to do a lot of different things in this lifetime. Be skilled at them, but maybe not necessarily be a master of them. But mastery is definitely something I pride myself on, and going deep, probably all the water in my chart. And in terms of the spiritual entrepreneurship and what I've been focusing, a lot of my attention on over the last 3 to 4 years, which will be the focal point for this episode today, I've been reading astrology and psychically, so astrologically and psychically, since 2021. And the first year I read for free. And in between that time, I mean, I was fucking grinding. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I remember at one point within the last like 5 or 6 years, I think I had like 3 or 4 jobs at one time. And I was thinking back to it and I'm like, damn, I don't think I've worked less than 55 hours a week since 2020. And it's really not to brag, but I think this is just a reflection of maybe like how I work and my energy. I have Mars in the second house in Taurus, which means that I have a lot of gumption to provide for myself. Um, and I, along the way, while I was working, I was living at home at the time. And I basically started Agua Astrology in my childhood bedroom. And I'm so proud of what it's grown to become and what it is becoming. I just counted back recently how many readings I've done since like November of 2025. And I've done close to 200 readings. And I've had, wow, I'm thinking about it in real time. You guys are getting a real time reaction to it. But I've had like definitely 50 plus one-to-one sessions in that period of time. And it's not to brag, but it's more just to give you an idea of like what the work has been and look like for me in the background, as I've built it, right? And so I've continued to build it. So one thing, and I guess this is one of the first lessons that I really like accepted in this past year, even though I knew it was something to be true, is that building a practice, especially a practitioner's practice business, it takes time. And maybe at times I do get frustrated with like where I'm at and where I would like for it to be. And sometimes I'm just like, dang, like, I'm hard on myself because I'm so used to being, I guess I had a lot of career advancement at a very young age. And so sometimes I can be hard on myself for those reasons. And that's actually one of the things that I've learned to be kinder about towards myself in this last year too. And so, by the time this drops, I have passed 800 readings in lifetime. And it's also been expanded to, the body of work is now close to like almost 200 podcast episodes, because really what you're doing in a practitioner's business, a spiritual business, is you're creating a body of work. You're putting your creativity into 3D form, and it's something that's meant to take time. It's not something that's meant to happen overnight. And I think sometimes, especially when you're an intuitive, you forget that. Like you can easily future trip, right? And you're like, okay, I know this is coming for me. I sense it. I feel it. I know this is my path. And it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think that's actually one of the things that I really like sat with over this last year, so to speak. Brianna is also employed through the company, and this podcast is very much a familial effort, and it wouldn't be possible without Nicole, without Brianna, and then of course the guests that we've had on and all of you listeners. So, yeah, we're really excited about what the podcast has grown to become, and the recent opportunities that we've experienced. And something along the way too is like, not only are you building a practice, you are also in the process of like developing your spiritual gifts too. Your spiritual business is always going to be a reflection of your process and your healing journey, how much you have healed, whether or not you haven't healed. And that applies in the past, the present, and the future tense as well. And so, everything that happened for me, I guess, in the last year in 2025 was really, really tough. But I also felt like it needed to happen in terms of like the shadow work that occurred. Because one of the other takeaways that I've had in this last year, and we're going to go into all of the main takeaways as this episode progresses, but one of the things that I've really noticed in this last year is how many spiritual practitioners, they get really, really good at one thing, and that's great for them. This is not to shit on them, but they don't focus on other modalities that could ultimately support them in supporting more people. And they also don't there's a lot of healers out there that have not really sat with their own shit and sat with their shadow. And I mean, I get it. Like it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do because you're tired in that period of time. You don't feel your best. It feels like depression at times. I think that's the closest thing that you can attribute it to, but it's so worth it because I really feel like you're not going to feel like a fulfilled or complete person unless you do that. And granted, some people aren't meant to do that in this lifetime. Some people didn't sign up for that. But if you are in the position of being a spiritual entrepreneur, you should be looking at your shit. And I say should because it's almost like a requirement. And I don't know how you can't not while you're doing this type of work. So also at the time of this drop, so this past week was actually 1 full year of entrepreneurship. I think we're only like 7 days out from that. And we're also dropping at around the time of there being potential combat, war. I mean, we are at war. And, there's talks of World War III, which I saw that transit coming at the end of 2022. And I just want to say to all this psychic light workers, the spiritual beings that are here to support the ascension of planet Earth and to really, they've incarnated to support and combat what is happening. I just want to say I think a lot of things are going to get better in 2026, and 2025 was not in vain. And hopefully some of the takeaways that you experience or learn from this episode are supportive for you if you are a spiritual entrepreneur. And if you're not, then maybe this is just helpful for you in the lens and the context of business. So here are some of the quick takeaways: clientele, things I've learned about my clientele, one's own process, and money. And I want to add a little asterisk to the money aspect and the money topic because we have done a couple episodes on money. And I feel like I could actually do another episode on that. So I might. Let me know if you're interested in that. But I have noticed, here's a little fun tidbit too, if you're interested in like stats, is that the episodes that are about money and sex seem to do the best in numbers. Why is that? Tell me why the episodes around money and sex seem to have the highest numbers for us, but also I would argue to say other podcasters and other content creators. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started officially. So as I've mentioned, building a business takes time. And I'd like to think that these lessons are probably something that at one point or another, every entrepreneur has experienced. Maybe that's not the case for a lot of people, that a business takes time to build. But I think the exceptions are maybe those who have a large following or are some type of like household name. Like one that's coming to mind is it's Kylie Cosmetics. And I remember back in like 2016 keeps coming up, right? Especially in 2025. But in 2016, I remember it was like 2016 or 2017, if you were a video and YouTube watcher of the makeup influencers that got a lot of attention at that time. So Jaclyn Hill, and she just kind of went through like a whole like second or third time of being canceled. I'm not quite sure, but she's like, Kylie Cosmetics, she started off big, and that's the one exception. And I think she was trying to defend herself. She's also a Cancer, by the way, but I think Jaclyn Hill is a July Cancer, and June and July Cancers, we are not the same. We are just not. And so she was like defending like the hair and her lip products, and she had just launched her makeup line at that point. So anyways, I do think that if you have a substantial following, like it's maybe not going to take as long for you as it would for others. And also like this type of business in general, like you have to look at the type of business that you're into, because a spiritual business is so different than, I don't know, a car dealership or a tire type of business. I don't know why cars are coming up. Maybe because I used to work for a car company. But yeah, I think that everything is different and you have to take that into consideration as well. And so the next finding I would say is that your business will change based on your process, your healing process. And your process is also a reflection of how much growth and, or another way of framing this is how much your consciousness has expanded. So you are going to, again, attract people that you can support either based off of the healing that you've already done, what you're currently dealing with, or kind of an introduction as to where you're going. I've experienced all of that with the clientele that I've worked with, where I've kind of seen like these patterns. Because one of the things that most, if not all, astrologers have naturally, and a skill set that you can train yourself to get really good at, is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is 50% of reading charts, truly. And what I've noticed with my clients is that I'm like, oh, this is kind of new. Like I've seen this before. I haven't seen this before, And I'm just like, oh, like these are my guides kind of giving me the heads up that you are going to be going through this in some way, shape, or form in your own healing journey. So that's what I mean by your process being mirrored back to you and your business really just being the masculine container, the structure for that, for you to have that type of growth. The next lesson I would say or takeaway is that your business falls on you, and how you show up for yourself will be tested time and time again. It's so funny. Sometimes I'll get people that have been like, oh, like, and this is not to call anyone out because I'm not, but I've had these experiences even in corporate. And I don't know if that says anything about me or if it's kind of me allowing myself to receive help. That could be the other way of looking at it if you're looking at it from the other side. But even if someone asks you to, or is like, oh, I'm willing to help you doing this, this, and that, it doesn't matter if they do or don't follow up with it. At the end of the day, it falls on you. And I've definitely had that where, people have offers them help and they just don't follow through with it. And it can be frustrating for sure. But learning boundaries in business, through your business, being your own boss, it's such a thing. It is such a thing, especially when you're someone who's naturally just positioned to maybe learn a lot of that in this lifetime. And that's definitely the case for me, having no water. I have nothing but water, but so having no boundaries. So form, I don't have a lot of form. That's a good way of putting it. And this is not to say that your guides don't support you, but it's a co-creative process and you have to be the one at the end of the day to do the damn thing. And that is, here's an example. I'm showing up today when I'm not feeling my best, but we're getting it done because I've made a commitment. And I love you guys and I want you guys to have this because I feel like it's valuable. I do think that when you become a business owner, that your business didn't come to you without reason, the business idea. It's because energetically you are a fit and a vessel for and a match at the end of the day for you to be able to carry this business out. And there's this book called, oh my gosh, who is it called? It's a call I used to recommend this all the time. Big Magic. That's what it is. But I think her name's Elizabeth Gilbert, excuse me. And she basically says in her book, oh my gosh, I'm having like a flashback. These eclipses. Okay, you guys, fun fact about me. I was born on an eclipse. And one of the most arrogant things I've ever thought is like, I was fucking born on an eclipse. I'm not going to be affected by them. No, motherfucker. No, Gabby. Like you have been affected physically in some way, shape, or form through every eclipse since 2023. It's so annoying to think back on. And it's usually been physical. Like right now, she's sick, like out of nowhere. I don't even know how I got sick. No one around me is ill at this point. But I was reading that book. I was in San Diego for the photo shoot for the old photos that are about to change. And I remember being on the treadmill, me and Nicole are at the office in front of the bay in San Diego. I think it's like the Hilton. And I'm listening to the book that I just referenced. And it basically says like, if you don't, take on this idea and build it out, it's going to pass to someone. And she has a real life example of that in the book. And so my point in sharing that is for you to not not take advantage and to I almost see it as like a gift. Like if you are being given this idea and you have these thoughts, there's probably a reason for it. And that's one of the motivations that I keep in mind when I'm really not feeling my best and I don't want to show up and do things. But I made a commitment to myself, and the only person that you're letting down is yourself, and of course your audience member too, if they look forward to what you're doing or if they rely on your light in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, when the harsh truth is that when you hold yourself back, you experience resistance or you lean into fear, you're basically giving your power away. And that was one of the main things that I learned in this past year too. It's like, where am I giving my power away? And thank you, business, for allowing me to see that too. So yeah. Another thing is it's probably lack when you don't feel ready to share what you've learned because you feel like someone is going to take that idea or offering away from you. And that's not to say maybe you're not ready to put that course out or that offering, but if it's something like lack or not feeling like you're enough, um, then that's probably something to sit with and the reasons as to why you don't feel safe to do that. Um, it doesn't matter if others are doing it. I think people are going to be attracted to you because of how you're doing it in your business and how you're offering and how your services are put out into the world, because there's always going to be more people than there are healers in need of support and light. And I remember one of my astrology teachers telling me that when I felt like maybe, you know, like, who am I to be doing this? And I certainly felt that way my first year reading. And I think that's why I read for free my first year, is because I didn't feel like, who am I to be doing this? Or I did feel that way, I should say. And I think the way that I worked through that, actually, I know the way that I worked through that. And that's my Mars and Taurus. And that's my North Node in Capricorn in the 10th house. Just constant repetition, working through those fears, hands-on tactile learning. That is how I broke through those limiting beliefs. And that's where my masculine energy comes in. And I just know that that is what works for me. So the next finding is that you cannot buy what you find by going inward. And shadow work is invaluable. You're probably like, well, what is shadow work? Well, it's really sitting with fear and those feelings that you don't want to sit with and you're avoidant to, you're resistant to, because it's going to come back in some way or another, because fear is the greatest and the best shapeshifter out there. That is something I've recently come to realize, is that fear really takes on so many different forms. And the purpose of fear, I mean, it's to protect you in some capacity, sure, but I think there's so much fear in the world. It's really meant to hold you back from achieving and getting to that next level of success and higher level of consciousness. There's this book called The Dark Side of Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. I just read it actually, maybe like at the beginning of this year. And she actually passed during her second Saturn return. And she died of cancer, I believe, and she was based out of La Jolla. I'm telling you guys, San Diego has like such spiritual energy. There's something to it. It feels like it's its own little vortex. But she released that book in the early 2000s, and she was really ahead of her time to be able to speak that diligently and specifically to the benefits of shadow work and even just what shadow work is. So go ahead and pick that up at your local library and put your tax dollars to good use. But she basically describes that you cannot be a full, whole, complete person unless you unless you sit with your shit, and that's it, and basically shit it out. Yeah, so I stand by that. And it was actually one of the best books that I've read so far, in terms of the spiritual context. And I do believe it was a New York Times bestseller as well. And the other point is, on that note of shadow work, which I've kind of spoken to a little bit, is that so many people in this space spiritual bypassing really is a thing. And I think I always knew that it was a thing, but it was directly in my face. And I had hands-on experience in this last year. And it was also kind of disgusting to witness people that I respected almost prey on others, and to be in the position of preying on others as well. And so, yeah, if I'm being honest, in some ways it did directly trigger my shadow. And my personal flavor of like lack and how it shows up to me, separate from that, I guess, examples or those examples that I just spoken to or alluded to. But I think for me, so much root chakra and solar plexus chakra work came up this last year, that I almost forgot why I even got into this work to begin with. And another thing that came up for me this past year is like, I mean, on all of that, I'm not going to get into the specifics. I'm not going to name names, but I just saw so much of the greed, I think, in this space is what I'm getting at. And it was almost like, oh, Gab, like I needed to be reminded of like why you even do this to begin with, because so many people are focused on, and of course I've been guilty of this too when my lack comes up, focused on what you can get versus what you can give. And 9 times out of 10, I would even say 10 times out of 10, because you are being of service, you are going to get that back 10 times over and over. And I see this with my mom all the time. My mom actually has Mars in Taurus in the 8th house, actually. So we have natural opposition with those placements. And we've said this example before, but she gifted, it was right when all this immigration stuff was coming up a couple years ago. And I'd not yet moved to San Diego, but there were 2 immigrants. You could tell that they were really scared and they were just trying to find their way and, get to Oregon because that's where they felt safer. At least that's what they had told us in Spanish. And they were standing outside of the Dollar Tree in the town where we live. And they relayed that to her and she could tell something was wrong. So she just gave them the $300, and she gave them the $300. And we had just actually had a family member in Mexico who did not need the money, which we knew that, because she had asked us, and she like explicitly reached out to me on Facebook Messenger out of nowhere. Hadn't heard from her in over 20 years. And she was like, can you get in touch with your mom, or can you give me her number? And I was like, what the fuck is this? So anyways, this all kind of happened within a period of time. And so my mom ended up giving them money. It was the same amount of money too that was asked of her from a family member that didn't need it. And she gave it to the 2 men that were basically going to try to find their way to find work in Oregon. And she ended up making, you guys, I think she played the lottery and she made $1,000 back. She made a $700 profit. And that right there shows you like the universe, God, source, divine, whatever you label that term to be, will literally give you more 10 times over when you're coming from a place of doing good and being of service. So take that story and clock it for another time when you feel you need that motivation. So those are some of the quick takeaways. What I've learned from my clientele is that your clientele and who you attract is a direct reflection of your own energy, your process, and how much you have or you haven't healed. And I've said that a couple times in this podcast so far. But your clientele and the lessons that you learn from your one-to-ones, if you're in a one-to-one structure or even in group setting, is that it's going to provide you lessons that you probably needed to learn, both of you, both parties involved, or any party involved. And I don't think I've shared this, or explicitly, but I had a client that threatened to sue me last year. And it was, I can guarantee you, about like a direct lesson for the both of us, guaranteed. I think at this point I had like 650 readings clocked, and I'd not yet received like any type of legal issue or anything like that. So I think percentage wise, like that's pretty good. But I just was like, yeah, I remember looking back on that. I'm like, this is such a test. Like, one of the things in this lifetime that I'm supposed to learn is not to be vindictive and retaliatory. So I had to learn to just like give her the money back, not make a big deal about it, because she was not mentally well. She was unwell mentally, and that's not an excuse for her behavior. But the girl had attachments on her in some way, shape, or form, negative energy, bad vibes. And she, anyways, I passed the test. She didn't. And that lesson to me was mirroring back how to just like let it go, Gabby. Just pass the test, let it go. And I actually had one of the lessons that I had learned with some of the people in the space that I've worked with in the past, which I recently passed this test too, where I was kind of like a little disgusted by the greed. I recently like passed the test with that as well, which I'm not going to get into because I think it'd be too obvious. But it it just kind of shows you like so much of them are setups that if you don't pass the test, the lesson's going to come up in another way. And if you are aware, and that's what consciousness and spiritual growth is and intuition is, it's just awareness and looking at things from different perspectives, and having a wider lens, if you will, you'll be able to pick up on these patterns and I guess support your own ascension process in that as well. And as you're supporting your own ascension process, you're actually expanding your intuition and you're becoming more psychic in the process. So it's all kind of interlinked, and hopefully that makes sense. And so what I've learned in terms of money, and again, I do think I'm going to need to do another separate episode on that, because you guys love those topics, is that you better expect your relationship to money in some way, shape, or form to come up if you are working for yourself. And whoever is telling you differently is probably lying and has a different set of resources, and they probably haven't sat with their own relationship to it. A lot of people look to the tool of exchange that is money for safety, and I will be perfectly honest, I'm still working through that one myself. But ultimately, your relationship to money is going to come up in some capacity. How do you view money? Safety, security, are you tight with it? Do you feel like you need it because if you don't, it triggers your wounds of like abandonment or feeling like you don't have enough, which in some way, shape, or form is probably going to be linked back to your childhood and your parents' relationships to money. And it doesn't need to make sense, but usually emotions are attached to it in some way, shape, or form. And so much of the healing journey that I've done going inward, constellations, astrology, sitting with my shadow work, all of the different modalities that say a lot of the same things, but they just say them differently. It all goes back to inner child in some capacity and subconscious programming and previous versions of self that you no longer are. And you more than likely adopted some type of version of your parents' wound to money, and it's probably showing up in your lower three chakras in some capacity. So everyone's different, but these are patterns that I've seen time and time over again in sessions, and who knows, maybe they're a reflection of my own healing too, and that's why I'm attracting those with the same wounds in some capacity being mirrored back to me. There are multiple ways to attract abundance, and abundance is not just money. And another way to look at this is like receiving a free meal, coffee, compliment, having a conversation with a client who's going through something similar to you, or is just so grateful for the service that you provided them with, or that you just gave them a reading that they're never going to forget and it changed their life. Those, my friends, are all forms of abundance. Just had to blow my nose a little bit. Brianna, keep that in if you're watching YouTube. She's still sick, you guys. Okay, hopefully it passed. Tomorrow I have a lot of this weekend too, at time of recording, we have a baby shower for Nicole to attend to. So I got to get it together, you guys. So we're almost done. How well you do or do not receive will also come up, and usually it's in relation to money, or at least that's been true for me. So I think money's going to get its own episode because I learned so much. And I remember talking to one of my girlfriends and I'm like, man, this just keeps coming up. Like, I just feel like I'm going to teach about it. And again, that was the insight and the prelude, the preface, if you will, to what I was going to go through all those lessons in root chakra last year. I'm in a much better place too, guys. This isn't me complaining. This is just me seeing like, oh wow, like you are going to confront heads on your fears at 100 miles per hour, and you're going to sit with all the things that like actually were being mirrored back to me with my inner child when my parents were being divorced or getting through their first divorce. So it's just kind of crazy, like how your subconscious mind is programmed, and it doesn't need to make sense, but so much of it, if you have the gift to become aware and to sit with it, it just so much goes back to like previous versions of self and how you related to safety as a kid, or what you defined it as safety as a child. So anyways, but I do think this is important to share. Even though I literally felt like shit in 2025 and I couldn't even move at some points, I remember just feeling so terrible and just like laying on my couch in my apartment in Coronado while I was like in it quite literally about a year ago. I think it was like the worst of it was like March, April, May of 2025. I, in my business, still made the same amount of money in 2025 as I did in 2024. And I was not nearly working as much or putting out as much in 2024 as I was in 2025, which tells me like my guys got me. My guides have my back. And so much of this is such a trust factor and identifying really where fear is trying to hold you back. So I think we're going to leave it there for now. I'm sure I'll have more things to add as we progress, but be sure to go back and look to my YouTube channel for those first couple episodes if you've been following my journey, if you're just curious what I've learned over the years. Um, and maybe I'll do like a follow-up YouTube video to this just so we can keep that pattern going because, I like patterns and all the things. But send me a DM, send me an email, hit me up on TikTok. I see everything. We see everything. We're so grateful for you guys. Sign up for Compass. I would love to have you. I don't offer courses too often. And a big part of the reason for that is because they take a lot from me in the sense of the energy required to create them, the resources, the holding space, the teaching life classes, and so forth. So it's going to be really special. I just feel like it's going to be good. And it's going to be super valuable. And I'll teach you how I do all the predictions using astrology. So thank you for hanging, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.